Hi, friends. Welcome to episode 21 of This Valorant Life. In this episode, Adam and I are going to be discussing for this season what does an ideal ranked guide looks like? What does it look like to guide your journey in your ranked improvement this year? So, with that, I'm just going to jump in with Adam. We've got a bunch of topics to cover. The first off, Adam, is how should people be structuring their agent pool?
Yeah, this one, I think people get a huge misconception. They're like, oh, yeah, let me learn all the agents and learn the game all at once. Um, my recommendation is typically one role. That role normally consists of 1 to 2 agents, just because it's hard to find one agent that works for all 7 maps, typically. So, for example, if you're playing Recon Initiator, you're probably going to have a split between Fade and Sova on some maps. For Duelist, you're probably going to be split between either Jet or Reyna, or like a Raze plus Jet, depending on if you have the agent pool for that. So yeah, controllers even, you have Omen on some maps, maybe Viper on some, or Clove on some. So I would say 1 to 2 for the majority of the roles, and just stick to that. Don't play other roles. If your role gets picked, just dodge, or I don't know, like maybe even just
I
force
think
your
you just
role
force your
anyways for an
role.
unideal comp. Yeah.
But okay, for the hard-headed listeners who are like, but I'm good at all the roles and I can play all the characters. Like you've coached enough people. Like, what is the problem when someone is playing more than like two agents, like, or is playing like multiple roles? What's the problem?
I mean, the biggest one is like you bring over habits from your other roles into, let's say you're a duelist player and you're filling Sentinel. You're gonna bring over that aggression to Sentinel, and you're gonna do the exact same plays, and you're just gonna suck, right? So that's number one, is you're just not gonna know what your role should be doing in depth. Surface level you might, right? Like a Sentinel might lurk, whatever. So you're just playing like a really bad, worse than average Sentinel, where you would have just been much better off playing like a 3 or a 4
Mm.
duelist comp, and kind of leveraging your strengths rather than maybe filling in the weaknesses there. So there's just like not a clear identity to when you play when you're filling, and yeah, you're just not impacting the game as you would be on your main role.
As we're talking about this, I'm almost thinking that, League and Valorant, in terms of like the mental part of the game, share a lot in common. And one of the things is like it's easy to be like overwhelmed. Like there's just a lot happening, man up, man down, outs, like people are rushing this. Like there's a lot of things happening. And the last thing you want, I think, is to be fighting your own habits that you would do on another role, right? Like if they're executing on your site, and as a duelist you're like, oh, I'm going to flood and just find a timing, like that's really not the play as a Senti player. But I think you don't really, in a environment where you're overwhelmed, you don't want to be second guessing yourself. You don't want to be like overcoming your natural tendencies. You want that to kind of flow because there's so many other things to handle.
Right. Yeah, you have to pay attention to the, I guess, details, and you can't pay attention to those details when you're just thinking about, is this a good play? Is this a bad play? Like, so yeah, just stick to the 1 to 2 agents. Stick within that role, and I promise you, you're gonna learn the game a lot quicker. And once you hit, say, a good rank, let's just say Immortal for the sake of simplicity, then you can start expanding your agent pool and your role if you want to. But get good on your role first, and then branch out.
Important to get good.
Yeah,
um
good.
so the hard rule is 1 to 2 champs or 1 to 2 agents on one role.
Correct.
And if you don't do that, you're trolling.
You are trolling. You're
You are
trolling
trolling
yourself. You're
yourself.
trolling your teammates.
Process. What does a good process look like for attacking ranked for this season?
Yeah, I think the big thing I want to outline is you just don't want to spam rank games and hope that it gets you there. Um, like a lot of people can make progress like that, but I think that is kind of a skill in itself of like how you reflect. So for the majority of people, you will benefit from a process of, say, warming up before you play. This will help you be more consistent. You play your ranked games, and specifically for your ranked games, you want to have like a cap. So I always try to recommend 3 games, but some people like to push 5. And this is just to maintain high quality of your games, playing with intensity, stuff like that. And then after your ranked games, it's very important to do a quick review. You could do this either immediately following a game, where you write down 1 or 2 things you did good, and bad, or you can do it at the very end of the day, end of your ranked block, and kind of just quickly review what you want to do, just so you can set yourself up on focus points for your next ranked block, because this is where improvement is important, because you're understanding and you have intention in your next rank block instead of just spamming games. So warm up for consistency, rank games, limit so you can play with intensity, review so you know what to look for and how to improve in your next rank block so you're not just playing to play.
And so I want to point out something really important here, which is, I think this is true for most of the listeners of this podcast, which is you're here because you'd like to improve. You'd like to improve in your rank journey. And so this process then, warm up, rank games, review, it's almost like committing to a workout routine. Like if you go to the gym and you don't warm up, you're going to get injured. So there's like a whole kind of cascade here. If you do these things in order, over time, you're going to improve. When you don't commit to 3 games or like a maximum cap of games, and you're just spamming games, then you're not committing with intention. And the problem is that that's totally fine if you're just here to just play games for the sake of playing games. If you're here to improve, then you need to be able to structure it in a way that you are able to improve. Obviously, if you're a savant and you don't need any of this and you're already in Radiant, then you don't need this. But for most people, you need to be able to approach things with intention and discipline in order to get better. And so part of this is committing yourself to a process. And actually, I want to ask you about this, Adam, is on the warm up, is I think, you will find, I think there's like 4 or 5 guys out there, like the best warm-up routine. I don't know that there is a best warm-up routine. I think each person actually needs to experiment to see what it looks like for them to warm up well. And there's lots of things you can try. There's range warm-ups, there's aim labs, there's DMs without sound, and I think it's important that people try it for themselves to see what locks them in for their games, instead of trying to just look at someone else's process and saying, oh, it works for them and therefore it's going to work for me.
Yeah, the warm-up is definitely a very unique and individualized thing. I almost treat the warm-up more so as a mental transition state rather than getting your body physically warmed up. Of course, I think that can help. Let's say if you include stretches in your warm-up, that could be very beneficial, especially if you're trying to avoid injury. But you could also warm up in a way by say meditating, or just taking a moment to focus on your breath. I don't know what it will be, but for the majority of players, just some type of transition stage to be hey, you're about to go into some intense ranked games. How should you set yourself up for success? And that's really the main thing there. So I would like to include all the elements there. You should do some stretching, you should maybe do some mental preparation, either in the form of meditation or whatever else you want to do, and then maybe some type of in-game time to warm up the mechanics. But some people like to kind of get rid of some and do others. But at the very least, some type of transition I think is very important. And maybe the last thing I'll add to that is the duration of this warm-up. If you're doing some type of mechanical training, say, if it's too long, you might end up, harming your performance in the game. And that can be a good or a bad thing. I think that's individual, whether or not, let's just say, for example, if your warm-up consists of 1 hour of aim training, likely you will perform a little bit worse in the game. But if that's the only time for you to stay consistent to aim train, then that might be worth it, right? So
the other thing I would add is, I think for warm-up, I think it's really important that this is a mental game. And so the big thing is, whatever your warm-up is, it needs to bring you to right now. You need to be right here. So pre-game, it's not a good idea to have your phone around. It's not a good idea to have notifications. If you're really trying to focus on winning and being the best version of yourself in the game, you need to be present. And so part of the warm-up should be the things that help you get present. And it shouldn't be things that kind of get you to space out or to kind of disassociate. And so I think that's a really important part of committing to a good process and figuring it out for you. And the second one, and this is actually from working out, is, again, there is no correct warm up for lifting weights. And so I used to power lift, and one thing they say is, if your second working set, which is your heavy set, is easier than your first, then your warm up wasn't long enough. And so I think in Valorant, if you play better like in the second half of your first game, your probably warm up isn't working or it's not good enough, right? And if you feel about the same way in your first half as you do your second half, then it's probably enough. Like you probably don't need more. So I think that, like for me at least, that's like a helpful like rubric to understand whether it's working for you or not. I want to move on to the next one, which is, what does a good process look like, Adam, for reviewing our games? Like, and because I think there's an important thing of like, it's not that helpful to watch every single round and just have 40 things you did wrong in a game.
Right. Yeah. For the majority of those, I guess I'll first say reviewing is a skill. It takes time. This is also why some people just reach out to coaches, because they don't know how to review, they feel lost. The easiest place to start is just looking at your deaths. So you can learn a lot from your deaths because it gives you just enough context that you can change a little bit before, and that might have changed the outcome. So I would say start with your deaths. Likely you want to start with your mechanical stuff first. Could you have taken this fight a little bit differently? And then move on, like back up a little bit. Was this fight even good in the first place? Did I use util beforehand? Look at the timing, et cetera, et cetera. Should I have even been here? Like as you get better, you're gonna look at those things. So yeah, look at your deaths first. It's also really good, in my opinion, to do it on a map by map basis. So say you finish Ascent. How did I feel about Ascent this game? My entries good? Great, let me write that down. My entries are great. But my post plants were bad. Okay, let me write that down. So next time you go into Ascent, maybe you're not focusing as much as your entries, but you're immediately thinking about the post plant. Let me check ults. Let me check numbers advantage. Let me see where my teammates
so like
are. Where's the bomb planted?
Specific process outcomes, or like kind of map specific things that you're looking for to work on, instead of just generally.
Yes, I think that,
there are some things that are general, which would probably be mechanical stuff, like things, but like there's a lot of things that are very particular to each map.
Yeah, I mean, maybe to quickly go into this point, I used to kind of work on clients as like a general point. Like I would do a VOD review, and then the next VOD review would just be a different map. And what I found is it's a lot easier and more focused to work with clients on one map and then moving on to another map in the next week or the next 2 weeks. So in other words, Valorant isn't actually a game of being good across all 7 maps, right? I think that's the difference. For example, say League of Legends, you're just on Summoner's Rift, right? You could even go as far to say on League of Legends, you should be focusing on your blue side versus your red side, just because the camp's a little bit different, at least back when I played. But for Valorant, you have to treat it on a map-by-map basis. Like, there's just so much variance on the map. There's specific details that people aren't picking up on, like your ult orbs. Like, should you be prioritizing a certain ult orb and contesting this certain space? Like, there's just so much detail that goes into each map and how to play it properly that I think it's naive to think that you can improve generally with general notes across all 7 maps. It's just too hard in my experience.
One thing I want to point out, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is just the mental aspect of reviewing your games. It's never going to be a pleasant thing to watch your games where you've lost. And there's actually a mental barrier, I think, for most people, like myself included, to like watching losses, because you're like, oh, I really don't want to like revisit this. It feels like cringy, even just to need to do. It's like listening to your own voice. I think that practice, like even just the mental practice of overcoming that, is a really good practice to work on, even more than just the act of reviewing and having it dictate your games. Like, you being able to actively choose to look at and accept your mistakes is like a huge step for you.
I completely agree with this. I would say this is something that I had a problem with when I was competing, because in a way you're kind of, encountering or like attacking your ego almost. You have to admit you suck. You have to admit you made mistakes. You have to admit that, you could have played better, and you will never be able to do that if you never take a look at yourself. So you're completely right. And I think, that's, in my opinion, what completely hindered me as a player when I was competing, and I really wish that I would have had the self-awareness to admit that I'm the one holding myself back, and it's not because I'm not talented enough. I'm just, I'm not gonna make it. All these other people are putting in more work than me, or, I can't be bothered. Like, all these things are just like defense mechanisms that you tell yourself because you don't want to admit you suck. So, completely agree.
How should players manage tilt?
Tilt, I think, is something that you shouldn't avoid. You should accept that it's going to happen. You just need to be able to bounce back quicker than the average person, or, quicker than you would have normally. So for me, with tilt, I try to do some type of reset after a round, or maybe after a few rounds, especially after like a huge round, like say I miss a clutch. So my reset normally consists of just repositioning on my chair. If anyone has ever watched my stream, you see I reposition my chair a little too much, but that's like my mental cue. Oh, let me just, reset. I know some players take some deep breaths. Some people will also like shoot stuff, like shoot their teammates or like trace heads in the pre-round. Just anything to kind of like cue yourself back to, hey, new round, next round, let's kind of focus on what's important.
I think it's important to point out that like tilt very specifically is like you fixating on someone else on your team or fixating on something you did, and it's the opposite of being present. So like there is not coach, Dr. K talks about it. Like there is only now. Like in the game, there is only now. And so the more mental space you have taken up by thinking about how you screwed up or how your teammate screwed up is the less you have available for like right here. And so whether that's a physical manifestation of like moving your chair, another one I've heard is like taking your hands, like just putting them on your legs and just like pushing down and like kind of just trying to release that tension, like helps you remind you that it's like you're right here right now. So I think this is an important one where people try different things, whether that's a breathing exercise, like a physical thing, or the tracing heads or other things to lock in. But all of that should be bringing you back to like this round, the economy right now, how you're going to play when the barriers drop.
I want to quickly add, as you were talking about that, you want to shift your mindset to identifying problems instead of identifying problems, identify solutions to those problems. So you actually have something to work with. Whereas like if you're constantly looking at problems, you're just going to be, I guess, upset, and you're just going to be kind of stuck on that thought. But if you're looking at solutions, then now you know what to do, and you'll be able to, actually play the round a little bit differently.
Exactly. They say that the best directions are not negative, they're positive. Telling someone to stop dying, not really that helpful. It's more important that we think about, okay, so like they're dying, so what should we be doing? Let's be more proactive here. Because there's a famous hockey team, this is from like 20 years ago now, but the Tampa Bay Lightning, when they won the Stanley Cup, their motto was safe is death. And, I think everyone have seen this in a losing game in Valorant, when the vibe is low, when the morale is down, and everybody's playing safe, and then nothing can really actually happen. And so I think like part of it is like, so like identifying right now, like resetting, kind of like letting go, because I think that's what the best players do. Like they're never not taking the op because they haven't played well that game. They're always trusting that they're able to do it, and so they're like able to refocus, let go of what happened, and just focus on the now. And if you can do that as like a mental habit, like as a mental strength, that will not only help you in Valorant, it'll help you in everything you do in your life.
Agreed.
LP range.
Yeah. So I mean, for League of Legends, for Valorant, this would relate to, I guess, low, medium, and high elo. And the reason why we want to bring it up is I think it's important, based on your elo range, what your focuses should be at. So generically, low elo should be focusing on mechanics, taking more gun duels, trying to take more risk, and being comfortable with that. Medium elo would be, really identifying with your role.
What would you put as medium elo?
Yeah, so for me, I would say probably in that plat to center range. You're the medium elo. Yes. So really understanding your agent, but more importantly, understanding your role, how you should be kind of getting impact, because each role gets impact in different ways, and understanding the nuances in there and just seeing what you can leverage. And then when you get into the high elo, I think that's where you're looking maybe a little bit more specifically at teamwork, macro, like kind of min-maxing how like your early round, your mid round, your late round, and like really understanding like rotates, like proper setups. Like of course having knowledge of those things will benefit you in the previous elo ranges. But from my experiences, high elo would be Immortal Plus, by the way. The game is just different, right? So if I'm trying to call a fake in gold, that's not going to be that's not going to play out the same in Immortal. And if I'm trying to call a fast rush because I noticed, on Split, for example, they're playing one Rafters and one site. So to me, in Radiant, that's a weak bomb site. If I try to call that rush in gold because there's one Rafters and one main, the util's not going to be set up properly. The spacing's not going to be set up properly. We probably won't even be able to rush A in gold because there's two people there. It doesn't even matter their positions, right? So those type of macro details are less important in the lower ranks, and I just kind of wanted to highlight that. You guys are playing a different game, and by watching these streamers and pro games, you can only pick up so much and apply it to your games.
And so you don't really want to be focusing on the details that don't matter, right? Like in a Radiant game, it matters that no one wants to play smokes. In your bronze or silver game, like it doesn't matter as much. Like everyone should just be playing comfort.
Yep, agreed.
Okay, so low elo, you're focusing on mechanics. Mid elo, you're focusing on
role mastery or like agent mastery.
And then high elo, it's just a different game. And in high elo, it's a different game. If you'd like to improve at high elo, you should seek out this guy named Dopai for coaching. He actually might be on the podcast.
Yeah.
We were talking about mental stack, like the things that you should be focusing on in the game to improve. Like, what is your priority list for like the mental stack of things you should be improving on in Valorant?
Yeah, there's really basic. You start with mechanics, because if you don't have good mechanics and good fundamentals, you're gonna suck, right? So get your mechanics out of the way, make sure it's clean, so you don't have to worry about it anymore. And
so
it's
by mechanics, and we've got a deep dive episode on mechanics, but we're talking about peeking, we're talking about crosshair placement, your ability to burst and understand how to use gunfight hygiene with different weapons. Like, is there anything else? Movement.
I guess holding angles, movement. Yeah.
Like even like
stuff
you should. It's not absolutely required, but like if you don't know how to jump peek yet, you probably should learn how to jump peek. It's just like an important part of the kit for lots of agents. And if you can't do certain things, it's just going to limit your ability to play the game.
Agreed. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So after that, after you got your mechanics kind of solidified, you got to figure out now how to play off your own util. So the reason why I put this so early on is I don't want people to go into the habit of using util that isn't capitalized off of. In other words, if you're playing Initiator and you're throwing util for your teammates, they might not even know to play off of your util, right? So it's better for you to kind of understand what the feel should be for your own util. So in particular, if I'm playing Initiator, instead of darting for my teammate, I'm going to dart for myself. I'm going to be close enough to dart for the execute so that I can also be a part of the play. And I guess in a different way you can word this is instead of playing off your util, you just want to be a part of the play. And this is incredibly important because once you know how to be a part of the play and you know how to use util for yourself, then you can kind of extend that to your teammates later down the road. But we'll talk about that in a second. So mechanics, playing off your own util / being part of the play. After that, you should be thinking about your columns, right? So now that you know how to play off yourself, now the next step is just communicating it. I'm darting and going out, or I'm darting and fighting, or I'm darting and peeking left, or I'm with you, I'm holding your A main, I'm holding your B main. Just doing all that stuff and being able to call them is really important. Your teammates now know what you're doing.
Because it's not helpful to be like, they're here. Right? Like, they're here. They're here. Like, they're around me. Like you want to because I do this all the time, which is like, you want to be able to like instantly be like, they're here, smoke B, like, or
Right.
they're A main, smoke A main. Like you just want to be clear with your comms, because the ability for you to let your teammates know, just it like amplifies your ability to play the game.
And it also increases your awareness. Like that's the extension of it. Because in order to have good comms, you have to have good awareness. So by building that communication skill, it then segues into the next point of the mental stack, which I think is being with your teammates to trade. So this goes hand in hand, in my opinion, with communicating, because if you are aware enough to give good comms, you're probably aware enough to know where your teammates are eventually. At least you'll build that skill. And then now you know what spacing you should be at. You'll maybe know what duel they're going to take so you can trade. And you'll also, if you're communicating your own duels, potentially your teammates will be trading you. So it's just really good to develop your comms first and then being with your teammates to trade.
And then lastly?
Last but not least is using util for teammates, right? So I think this is kind of akin to mastering yourself, or like the airplane example is like you put on the oxygen mask for yourself and then you help someone else put the oxygen mask on. I think that's how you should be thinking about your util. So once you have the other 4 down in your mental stack, now you can be thinking about, oh, your teammates here, let me use util for them. And then that might give you a timing to now play off of them, right? But and I see this, the reason why I put it last, and I think it's important for it to be last, is people use the util for teammates as a crutch, right? So a lot of initiator players specifically, or controller players specifically, will throw util for their teammates on the execute, or cross-map util on defense, and then they're nowhere to be seen. So in other words, you're relying on your teammates to win the gun duels in order to influence the round, and you're slightly helping them, but it's not enough across games, like a large sample size, for you to actually, I guess, influence the game yourself.
I think the important thing to notice, like when I look at this list that we've created, so like mechanics, peeking off your own util, comms, being with teammates to trade, and then lastly using utility for teammates. There's like an activeness in all of this of like really taking the improvement in your own hands. Like you can win games by being purely supportive, but you will improve more. The ranked LP gains will happen faster if you are the most active part of the improvement in your games. If you're mostly supportive, then you're really dependent on your teammates. And so like I think I'm in high elo, I'm sure that's a big part of the game, is supporting your teammates. But for you, if you're not high elo, then the big part is like for you to actually take the ball in your own hands, which is peeking off your own tilt, being active. Like there's all of these things that are very active and risk taking and trying to make things happen rather than letting things happen to you.
Completely agree.
And so I think it's actually like this list is not only like a list for you to work off of, it's actually like a bit of a mindset shift. And you might feel that a little bit if you're trying to do these things. The other thing I wanted to add, Adam, is like this list that you've given us, I actually think it's actually a really good filter for how you're reviewing your games. Like when you're reviewing your games, if the mechanics aren't there, like review that first, notice your mechanics, and then go practice some drills. Like that's probably the easiest thing for you to fix, because you can go do drills. You can go in DM and just focus on this one thing, like a jiggle peek or whatever you want to do. But that's probably the easiest. But I think you can almost like go through your VOD reviews as a list to see which one of these like kind of aspects that you need to check off.
Yeah, I like that. Quick checklist.
An improvement isn't linear. What do you mean by that, Adam?
Yeah, I think with improvement, a lot of people feel like they're stuck.
Okay, so this is so funny. I was explaining to my wife, I'm married, guys, about this comment, like when people say they're hard stuck, and she's like, that's such a cruel way to refer to someone. And I'm like, people talk about themselves as a hard stuck all the time. It's like a pretty common term. I think it was just pretty funny.
Yeah, so with it is a good point. You are hard stuck in a way until you have enough improvement that it takes you to the next step. So don't really think about improvement as like a ramp, think about it more as like a staircase, right? So you need to kind of build up enough energy, I guess, to take the next step, right? And that next step is going to take time, right? And then eventually, after you take the next step and you've built on your foundation, you'll kind of just have this exponential growth when everything clicks, right? So it's hard to explain, but I kind of think about it in the elo range. I feel like if you actually did the mechanics first and then did agent mastery and then looked at macro, your improvement on a ranked basis will kind of go on like a crazy, I guess, exponential growth once it all clicks. And it's not necessarily based on your reflective rank, but like your skill level. So in other words, someone at gold, they feel like their growth should be linear to get to plat and then immortal, but you're going to be stuck at some point. And then once it clicks, and like let's say you do the agent master, you might go from the medium elo bottom plat to ascendant really quickly because it clicks. And then same for I would say like maybe the low elo. If your mechanics suck, maybe you go from iron to say gold really quickly, right? So in that skill range, your improvement will be a little bit more exponential, if that makes sense.
Should players not look at their LP?
I personally don't think it's good to look
Or
at
RR?
your.
Sorry.
Yeah, your
We're
RR.
mixing up terms.
No, you're. Yeah, I personally don't think you should be looking at your rank too much. I think it's more important to look at, say, your win rate on a map, or maybe your win rate on an agent instead of your, rank overall.
I think we've talked about this before. Is like the RR is a bit of a red herring sometimes. You could just go on a win streak because you had 4 AFKs on the other team, and you think you're like really great, right? But it's really been the AFKs. I actually think it's helpful if you're already on this journey. You've already been doing your reviews. You have these things that you want to work on. You should have some process goals, not outcome goals. So an outcome goal is win the game. The process goal is I'm actually going to peak off my util 3 times each half. And if I can tick that off, then I know I'm improving on that. And if you really believe those process goals are aligned with you getting better as a player, if you keep doing that, you keep getting better at that, ultimately, that's going to make you a better player. Ultimately, that's going to help you win games. So I think like being able to like kind of pull back from like concentrating too much on the RR and really pull back to actually looking at yourself as a player. If you're improving, that's going to turn into wins. If you're stagnant and not improving, it's really hard to see whether that's happening or not if you're just looking at RR, because it could be either giving you the wrong signal or not giving you a signal at all.
Yeah. Typically, what I like to say with my clients is the first 2 weeks is the hardest because they're going to go from whatever rank they're at, and then they're going to maybe dip down a rank and maybe even more, just because you're trying to change the way you play based on my feedback. And then once it clicks a little bit, it's going to come back up. I recently discovered the idea of like the Dunning-Kruger effect, but basically to quickly explain, it's like if you know nothing, you're at peak of stupidity and you think your confidence level is super high. And then as you learn more, you kind of dip down, and they call it like the valley of despair, because like it feels like there's so much and you don't know anything and you're getting overwhelmed, you're not making any progress. And then you kind of like come back up as it starts clicking a little bit more. And that's kind of akin to your rank sometimes when you're trying to improve at something and it doesn't feel like it's going to work.
They say that if you ask everyone if they think they're a below average driver, and above average driver, everyone says that they're an above average driver, which is objectively couldn't be true. And it's because we all think we're actually better drivers than we are. But we don't notice that we're not good drivers because we're not good enough to notice, right? Like, I think every pro player would be able to say something about another player that they admire and wish they had as part of their game. But like, how many of us 100%. Have ever looked at any one of our teammates and be like, I wish I had that? Like, we just don't notice.
You just don't know.
Yeah. I think LS from League is like a big fan of the Dunning-Kruger effect. It can sometimes be weaponized, so it's not always like a good one, but it's an important one to understand. And what does it look like to pace your journey? Adam?
Yeah, I think this is kind of like managing expectations. Like if you say, for example, I want to hit Immortal in 6 months, maybe that's a good timeline for you. Maybe it's not, because everyone grows at different paces or rates. But like, if you're trying to then shrink that 6 months to say 3 months or 1 month, and you just really grind it out and play a lot, so instead of 3 ranked games, you play 10, right? You're not gonna improve at the rate that you want to. It takes time, right? So you have to be okay with it taking time, and you don't want to front load that grind so much, because then you're gonna burn out and you don't see progress, right? And I don't know, I heard it somewhere, is like burnout doesn't come from working too much. It comes from working and not seeing results and not seeing progress. I don't know how true that is, but I think that kind of relates here, in that you kind of want to pace how much effort or how much input you're putting in to how much results you're expecting to see. And that's, I think, super important for you to be in it for the long term, because I'm sure a lot of people listening here maybe have aspirations to go pro, and you have to understand that that's a long-term process. And for me, I only gave myself a year. Realistically, a year, looking back at it, was not even close to enough time, because like you have to go through the tier 3 scene, you have to go through the tier 2 scene, and then you might have a chance to break it to tier 1. I'm just over here thinking like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go from Radiant ranked player to tier 2, tier 1 pro in a year, and that's just not realistic at all. So yeah, managing expectations and going from there.
I think your comment is spot on. If you're hoping to become a pro, then the first thing you need to do is become a pro at managing your own process. Like if you're not like, pros are disciplined. Like they put in the scrims, they put in the practice, they put in the ranked games. Like they're doing their work. Like if you can't do it to even get to a Radiant level, then like you're already demonstrating like you don't have the temperament and the mindset to do it. Like if you can commit to a process of capped games, reviewing, proper warm-up, really understanding where you're lacking as a player, and then creating process goals to improve on them, like you're going to level up as a player, because no one else wants to do this work, because it's hard and it feels bad to look at where you suck. But if you can like look at that in the mirror and actually improve on it, like the growth, the ability to improve, it's exponential. But it's just, you need to be able to commit to it and be willing to like really look at it. Because I think it's easier to just be like, oh, just queue up another one, or just rage queue. And I think like if you can build the fortitude to manage that, like that's the real thing.
Completely agree. It's kind of like if you don't have the self-control and emotional management to stop yourself from tilt queuing, you're not going to have the self-control and emotional management to perform in a match, right? Like, and it's as simple as like not hitting the Q button. That gives you a mental edge in a game, because maybe that'll let you mentally reset quicker just because you have more self-control, or maybe that'll give you the ability not to, I guess, implode on your teammates in a ranked game or in a tournament match if they say something in the wrong tone of voice, or they address you with raw emotion and you just flip out on them, and then boom, match is over, vibes are dead, right? Like, so it's a huge part. And I want to quickly say, we maybe should have credited this episode to Broken by Concept at the start, but if you're interested in the process and you love the process, we were both inspired by their podcast, and that's why we started this podcast, in a way, is to try to, I guess, bring that mental side and that mental game over to Valorant. And they do a great job with the League of Legends stuff. So that's why we keep saying LP, and League of Legends is, we take a lot of inspiration.
This is, tell me how to play, tell me you played League before without telling me you played League before. It's stirring exactly. up RR and LP. Is there anything we didn't cover that you feel like we should talk about, Adam?
I don't think so. I think maybe one thing I'll add, though, that is not really a part of this, is have your long-term goals and like be okay with that. But everyone has those goals, right? Like you're not special with your goals. It's how you approach those goals that makes you potentially different. So just because your dream is to go pro, that means nothing if you don't actually create the steps to go pro. And I want to say it here first, because I have a lot of discovery calls with potential clients that have those dreams, and I just want to say they're not unique.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think it's consistency. Like that's the key of a pro, right? Like, do you show up all the time? Like lots of people are like, oh, I'd love to have an amazing body and abs. I'm like, great. So you're gonna have to count your calories. You're gonna go to the gym 3 to 5 times a week. You're gonna be thoughtful about your cardio. We're gonna do a warm up, like all this stuff. You commit to that for 12 months, like you're gonna have whatever you want. And if you a lot of people would be like, yeah, but I don't want it. Like, I don't want to do that. Then it's like, that's okay. Just admit that you don't want it that bad, right? Like, if you want to be a Radiant player, if you want to be a top 500 player in North America, if you want to be a pro, you have to be even at the top, like 10 of that list. Know that, like, you're going to have to commit to a process that naturally will weed out most people. So, like, if that isn't of interest to you, if the hope is that you're just like a Naruto, that you've got this, demon living inside of you, you just need to release it. Like that's probably, then that lifestyle is probably not for you. Like you are probably not Neo. You are probably not the one, because the ones don't need any of this help. They're already there. They're already Zekin or Narrate, that are just naturally just kind of rise to the top. I think if you are willing to commit to this process for the long term, you will have a really high chance of getting there, of getting to Radiant. The whole pro discussion, I think, is like a whole crapshoot of time and place and opportunity, which is probably another discussion. But the first cut is, are you willing to commit to something that's really hard? And if you're not, then that's okay. But if you are, then just know that that's kind of that's going to be the test.
That's the requirement. I mean, that's step one. If you don't acknowledge that, you're just not going to make it. You're better off not investing the time, the energy, the money. And, I wish I knew that before I started that journey. And that's why I try to tell people that have those goals, you have to put in the work. You have to put in more work, and you have to be self-aware than I was, because I'm gonna be real. I had more opportunity in starting position than anyone else that is trying to go pro nowadays, just because I was there earlier. I was Radiant, number one. I had experience in other games. I had competitive experience in other games. I've worked with teammates. The game was earlier, right? So the opportunity was bigger. And if I couldn't make it without looking at my process and everything that we just discussed today, you're 100% gonna have a lower chance than I did, just objectively looking at it, right? Because now the game's harder. There's also people that have gotten mentored by others. And I guess what I'm trying to say is you have to take it seriously. Otherwise, it's just going to be, not worth your time. You might be better off expending that time somewhere else.
And just to be clear, you don't have to have a dream of going pro. Maybe just getting to Immortal. I know for me, I'm not going pro. Like me, my goal long term would be to get to Immortal. And if I got there, I'd be super happy.
Right.
Create goals that you want, because they're for you. It's not for anyone else. And when you achieve it, it's a big deal for you. Like that's the achieve that's kind of the win for you. It doesn't have to be someone else's dream, and I think that's an important thing as well. Thanks for listening, everyone. It's been great connecting with all of you. Thank you for all of your comments. I am not Adam's dad. We're just friends. I do have kids, so I am a dad, but not his. We just want to welcome all of you to the show if this is your first time, and please stick with us. We've got lots of great content coming as well. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you so much.